Let's take a look at the Ultrasabers Aeon series. So I have here an Aeon V2, Aeon V3, and Aeon V4. Ultrasabers sells all of these lightsabers at once, so that's just kind of how they do it. Aeon V2 was released first. Aeon V4 that I have here was released the most recently. There is also an Aeon V5, which I don't have here unfortunately, but Aeon V5, the body of it looks very similar to V4. It just has a few different kind of style differences, but the overall shape of the hilt is very, very similar to the V4. So it just kind of has claws in the emitter and then kind of a different texture to the grip section. But let's take a closer look at the ones that we have here. So if we start with the Aeon LEV2, it looks the most flashlighty. It has a very kind of uniform diameter to the hilt. So there is a little bit of a taper here, and a little bit of a sort of flare out by the switch section and in the emitter section. But it's just a very basic design for the hilt, and some may call it a little flashlighty. So another point about this hilt is it doesn't accommodate sound, so this is only available from Ultrasabers as a stunt saber or as an empty hilt, and that's because the diameter of this hilt is a little bit more narrow than a lot of the other Ultrasabers hilts. And the pommel is not MHS compatible, as is the case with many Ultrasabers hilts. So this is kind of an earlier hilt that Ultrasabers made, and they do still sell it. And I know sometimes people that duel or people that do lightsaber spinning kind of like these more basic hilt designs like this because, stuff doesn't really get in the way when you do that. So also if we just kind of look at the overall length of these hilts, it's pretty much the same. The Aeon V2 is nominally shorter. So if you compare it like side by side, it's just a tiny bit shorter, not very much. Now with Aeon V3, we see several different design differences popping out. It's definitely a wider hilt, but we also have a few different tapers kind of in this hilt. So in the grip section, we have a nice taper right there. And then above the switch section, there's another taper as well. And so these kind of rounded features, it adds a little interest to the overall hilt design. And it does sort of have similar grooves to the Aeon V2 throughout the hilt as well. So that's that's actually a pretty common feature among all of these designs, is there are grooves, although you can see that kind of the type of the grooves, it varies among the hilts. I guess one other point I should make with the Aeon V2 is the pommel. It has kind of these vertical lines to it. The knurling on the pommel has these vertical lines, whereas the knurling is more crossed on the other two pommels. So yeah, I mean, the big difference though with this is you notice how much more rounded it is overall in its design than the kind of more flat Aeon V2. Now if we move to Aeon V3, the overall design, I mean, it has these similar spots kind of where the hilt tapers, but the location has changed a bit. So we still have this spot below, the switch section that has the taper, but it's not quite as long. So the taper is kind of more gradual and longer on the Aeon V3. And then if we look above, there's another taper here above the switch section, and it's same thing. It's kind of more abrupt, whereas it's a little more gradual, kind of the slope to the Aeon V3. Now we have this new kind of series of grooves above that, and then we have another kind of taper way at the top of the emitter section, and that's kind of a neat addition to the Aeon V4 design, I think. There's just a lot more kind of interesting things going on design-wise with the V4 than there is really with the V3 or the V2. And, even we just have these different sizes of grooves. So the sizes of the grooves throughout these hilts, like all of these grooves are the same. All of these grooves are the same as well. And on the Aeon V4, these ones are kind of a little bit wider, and the grooves toward the top are a little bit more narrow. So, it just kind of adds a little interest, and it just makes the hilt overall a bit more interesting. So that's just kind of some of the things I noticed about these different hilts. And, again, there is an Aeon V5 as well. It's very similar overall in its look to V4. It just has kind of a different texture for the grip section. It does have a different pommel that has kind of more edges to it, kind of like claws, and then same in the emitter section. So, if you're looking for something for kind of dueling or for simplicity or for spinning, these three are probably a better bet actually than the V5. V5 kind of visually looks the most interesting. V4 I think is second place in that department. But otherwise, if you're looking for kind of the most narrow hilt and, possibly something for kids, V2 might be a good option. So it's really, there are reasons to get any of these or the V5. So I think that's kind of why Ultrasabers may have them all available at once. Sometimes when a company releases a new version of something, they discontinue the old. But at least with the Aeon line, the Dominic's line, and the Initiate line and Dark Initiate line, they have the V2, V3, V4, and V5 all released at once. So you have a lot of options, but just thought I'd compare three of them for you. And again, here's the Aeon LE V2, Aeon V3, and Aeon V4 from Ultrasabers.